Thanks, Scott. What drives these things? Does anybody know? What's the key thing that drives a phone, a smartphone? A battery. Apart from that, a microchip, a microprocessor. So the microprocessor in phones is like it's like the silicon brain. So the brain of the phone is the microchip. Right, the chap who invented that, who made it more efficient, is here, Dave Jaggar. All right. Now, Dave, I won't steal all of his thunder, but Dave I met first in 2001 when he came back from the UK to bring up his children. And Dave had 9 years at Arm Holdings working on microprocessors to make phones and all the other digital technologies more efficient that we can use them today. And I said this morning that around 90% of all phones have a microprocessor that Dave had a hand in creating or inventing. He corrected me and said it was 98%. Then he conceded, well, it's probably 100% of all phones globally Dave's had a hand in. It's pretty remarkable, very remarkable. Now, of course, here in New Zealand, we're going to focus on gold medals at the Olympic Games or winning a rugby World Cup or a cricket World Cup or whatever, because the media does like to focus on sporting heroes or music heroes or heroes for nothing. We don't even know how they become heroes. What are they called? The Kardashians. Yet those who make a difference globally from a scientific or an engineering perspective or an academic perspective do not get that same credit, and they deserve it. They deserve it. So Dave was awarded a medal from the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Have I got that right? Now that's like the Nobel Prize. So the Nobel Prize typically is awarded some 20 or 25 years after something is invented or something has occurred. And it's the same with this award. So this is an award, this is the pinnacle of awards from an engineer's perspective. And Dave, along with his partner, was awarded that this year. And I'll get him to talk about that, and I'll fill in a few other details at the end. But Dave, welcome. We look forward to what you've got to share, and I'm sure you will all find it fascinating, and do ask those questions once Dave's finished. Over to you, Dave.
Jacob never likes me having him model the medal, but there's always a funny story with the medal. It's a combined medal from the Institute of Electronic Engineers in the US and the Royal Society in Edinburgh. And I didn't read the instruction manual properly when I got it, because it's bronze. And I must admit, when they first gave it to me, I went, oh, that's not gold, it's bronze, never mind. Off I went. While I was overseas receiving it, I was actually having my house repaired, and the foreman received a package in an armoured car. He thought I was lucky enough to always have my mail delivered in an armoured car, but actually there's another medal, and they give you a presentation. That medal's just for presentations. The real gold medal does exist, but they suggest you don't carry it with you in case you get mugged as you leave the restaurant. So if you want to feel the difference between bronze and gold later, that's significantly, you wouldn't want to have it around your head all night, you'd have a sore neck. So it did exist finally. How did all that come about? It's just the subject of the next few minutes. The ARM microprocessor is the thing that I had a hand in developing. It is the electronic brain, as Jacob said, and almost everything portable. And my part in its downfall, because I took it into very little devices, I took it down into the market from where it was designed. So it's a bit of a pun on a Spike Milligan line. I share the medal with Dave Flynn. Dave's the Professor of Computing at Southampton University. The medal itself was for groundbreaking contributions. It had an impact on the development of electronics. In particular, our one is because we've shipped over 100 billion of these things now, actually 150 billion worldwide. So it's the Institute of Electronic Engineers and the Royal Society of Edinburgh. How this all came about, it was really what they call a perfect storm of technology and timing all coming together. At the end of the 1980s, we'd basically had one human generation of people learning in universities about how to program computers, how to design computers, how to make algorithms. And all that started to come together with the personal computer at the end of the 80s. And if you look at one of these things, and I've got that very top one there as one of the very simple ones we did early on, and I've got the very one in my hand. This is a $500 computer from about 1992, and this is the microprocessor chip. These are read and write memory chips that lose their contents when you turn it off, but that's how you contain data when you're running it. And this is the memory chip that holds all the programming that doesn't lose its data when you turn it off. So when you turn it back on again, it runs programs from here. And that's the whole computer, along with screens and keyboards and things. So that was the top of the technology in 1992. And we had to try and squeeze that into things like cell phones. Someone said, what's inside a cell phone? It's a battery. The people behind the lithium-ion battery, John Goodenough and his team, got the Nobel Prize for Chemistry this year. So the battery technology is another huge part of making these devices. But along with that bit of technology and the computer scientists and the computer itself becoming available and everyone being able to program it, at the same time, analog cell phones with a cell phone network came together such that we could communicate by some means. And the thing that I really had the big hand in was the digital cell phone. And this is a fairly graphic example of how that changed over the 8 years from 2005 when the Pope was inaugurated. That's the Pope being inaugurated in 2005. And 8 years later, it looked like that. So a fairly rapid take-up of technology. Of course, the digital implications came early. We had things like digital cameras that obviously you didn't have to go and have your photos developed, of course. You could just look at it on the screen. You had a photo album at all times. An iPod was a similar thing, carrying your music around with you at all times. We had ways of connecting our homes to the internet to get data in and out, including Wi-Fi and cellular is just as close as I think to magic as getting data over the air seamlessly. It's almost literally pulling stuff out from up your sleeves. GPS to get accurate positioning anywhere in the world, and digital TV, things like YouTube. But all that came together in one device, the cell phone, over the next few years. This is where the ARM microprocessor comes in. It is the microprocessor, the silicon brain at the heart of this thing. And what makes it unique is it can run for many hours off a battery. Other microprocessors just aren't as efficient as that, and I had a big hand in making it more efficient. That's why I'm half the medal. Dave Flynn made it much more connectable. He made it connect to other people's silicon chips. So practically every cell phone, digital cameras, disk drives, all these things, smart cards. It was a very small start. You might think that a company like this is a big high-tech Silicon Valley shiny building. It was actually an old barn in a town called Swaffham Bulbeck, 8 miles or so outside of Cambridge in England. We had 12 engineers that we inherited from a previous company, and we had $1.5 million from Apple to kickstart us. Robin Saxby, who's now Sir Robin Saxby, he got knighted for his work at ARM, was the CEO, and he was hired in 1991. Beautiful old barn though. We had about 10 staff. We were almost always going broke. We just didn't have much money. We took some money off the European government. We wouldn't exist post-Brexit. That's one of the biggest jokes about Brexit for me, is companies like this just wouldn't exist without the European government. But we were almost going bust. Now, the unusual thing about ARM is they don't manufacture anything. They're like an architecture firm. They design and then sell their designs. And there's about, I think it's 1,650 on there, isn't there? Yeah, 1,650 factories worldwide churning out ARM designs. And ARM get a little royalty back for every chip that's sold. So you buy a license, a few $1 million for one of these designs, and then every time you make one, you give ARM a few cents. The 150 billionth has just shipped a few weeks ago. We're shipping about 25 billion a year now. 720, that works out to 720 per second, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. About 20 for every person on the planet. More people use an ARM every day than have clean water or a toilet. Use a cell phone. It's sad. The penetration is even higher than that. The company turns over about 1.86 billion, which is about 20 times smaller than Fonterra, but has about the same profit as Fonterra. very profitable company, because the 1.1 billion coming in from royalties is basically gravy. Once that's all designed, that money just flows. 6,000 employees now, fairly big company. They were bought by SoftBank, a Japanese bank, in 2016 for 31.4 billion, which was the biggest tech deal ever done in Europe. That's how the shipments have taken off over the last few years. I left here, so it's clear to me that I had to leave the company for anything good to happen. Of course, the reality is the time to market for some of these products is enormous. The stuff that you design in 1994 gets designed in 2004. And so this product here was the main one I did in 94, this one in 96, this one in 97, and this one towards the end of my career. I'm born and bred in Christchurch. I went to Canterbury University. At high school, my maths teacher told me I would never be an engineer, which was a very fortunate thing to hear, because I'm a computer scientist and it was the right degree for me. For my master's thesis, I studied this microprocessor before it was well known. I joined ARM in 1991 as employee number 17, and I started retiring 9 years later. It took me a couple of years to extract myself out of the company. The timing of all that is my eldest child was 4 years old, and I wanted to educate her in New Zealand. So I did 5.5 years in Cambridge in the UK and 3.5 years in Austin, Texas. I started and ran their high performance team there. So I really only worked for 9 years, which has been a good career. The reason my name's on the medal and not anyone else is because, well, not on that one, on the pair of them, but when we started ARM, we made one huge mistake. This is an intellectual property company. The only product they have is ideas. And the way you protect an idea is with a patent. The technology that we got from the parent company had absolutely no patent coverage. So we had an intellectual property company without any intellectual property, which I always joke is a bit like starting a farm with no land and no cattle. You really haven't got anything to start with. But fairly quickly on, I came up with an idea that made, as I said earlier, made it about 33% more efficient or about 50% faster from cheap memory. And if you buy a computer today, one thing you'll always see that they vary the size of to adjust the price is the size of the memory in the computer. You might get one with 4 gigabytes of RAM versus 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's changing the size of the memory, because that's one way you can adjust the price of the computer. And I came up with a way of halving that basically for free. So I had a couple of patents. They were filed in 1994, and basically the company built on the back of these two patents. The curve, I explain this curve because the reason it was unusual was because we completely moved off this cost-performance curve. Like everything, like an automobile, for an example, if you want to go at a certain performance, it will have a certain cost. But if you want to double that performance, it's likely to cost 4 or 10 or 100 times more. So a comparison would be, you can go and buy a fast car in Christchurch today, it might cost you $200,000. If you want to go twice as fast as that, you probably need a Formula One car, and you probably need $200 million. Okay, it's that sort of ratio. It's very hard to get off those curves. It's very hard to do a lot better incrementally for incrementally the same amount of money. My invention got us onto that red line. It got us onto a completely different curve where the cost and performance was on a different ratio. And I always joke, there's a name for something up here. There's a name for something which is slow and expensive. That's called easy. Slow and expensive. Something that's cheap and fast, that's called hard. I know the technical terms for those. I just thought I'd, near the end now, just talk a little bit about what's in a cell phone. A lot of people perhaps don't appreciate exactly how much technology is in that little thing in your pocket. For starters, there's at least 5 different antennas. The one for Wi-Fi, the one for your cellular connection when you're out and about, the one to get your GPS signal, the one to do Bluetooth so you can hear things on your new Bluetooth earbud. NFC is the technology that allows you to buy something at the supermarket using your phone. Near field technology it's called. There's usually a couple of speakers, a microphone. I can't say it because she'll go off on my phone if I say the word, but you have a personal assistant built into it that listens to that microphone. Charging wirelessly. It vibrates if you've got the speaker turned off, so there's a wee motor in there to make it vibrate. There's usually 4 to 6 cameras, a compass, a gyroscope, a barometer, a thermometer, a heart monitor in some of them, a fingerprint sensor to unlock it, a face sensor to unlock it with your face, obviously a touch screen, all packed into that. And all those pieces of technology have separate ARM processors running them all to bring it all together. So all that technology packed into that little thing in your pocket. That's sort of the pretty picture. The next picture is what we haven't quite worked out, but I think it's not quite on the horizon, but we can see sort of a route to it as making a human brain. What has been solved fairly recently is how to make something pretty close to a human body, and this is a video of that. Now the scary thing is that robot's completely autonomous. You just tell it what you want. It's not a person with a game console steering that thing. It knows what it's going to do and it does it. It knows how to pick up boxes on the floor and operate a broom and things like that. So that's a wee glimpse of the future. Just as a final slide, here's a glimpse of the past. This is Dave Flynn and I and Sir Robin Saxby at the awards ceremony. So yeah, so that's how it all might pan out.
What's ARM's relationship with people like Intel? I mean,
Intel used to be our big competitor, ARM, and now Intel, if you plug it into the wall, you would use an Intel processor because it uses so much electricity. If it runs off a battery, you'd use an ARM processor. So Intel actually have an ARM license. They make ARM chips as well for their low-end stuff. So, but yeah, much better. Yes.
How close is it before we can stop carrying the phones around with us?
The size is really about battery versus screen. And you've probably noticed in the last 10 years, screens have been getting bigger as we've been getting worse eyesight, I think. And so I wear a smartwatch, but I don't use it much for anything like that. But it's really making the screen much smaller. So we went really small, but now that we're starting to look at big, complicated web browsers and things, phones have gone a bit bigger again. As for carrying something that might talk to us neurally, then there's a lot of research going on with that worldwide where it'll communicate you over your brain, through your brain waves. But I haven't seen anything close. I've seen spectacles that shine a projector on the back of your retina, so directly, you're not looking at an image, it's projecting image on the back of your retina. I have seen those, but I haven't seen them come to market yet. But yeah, I think it's
seeing is believing, won't it?
yeah, well, they do work. I think it's just in the field it's complicated. And then once again, now you've got heavy batteries somewhere on your spectacles, and I see you're wearing glasses like I am. I want nothing worse than these weighed down somehow. Yeah.
Jeremy. Dave, what's next for you?
Oh, Jeremy, I knew you'd ask me that question. Yeah, that's your job, my friend. I've just about solved, on the personal side, I've just about finished redoing my house after the children have all gone to university in Auckland. And so I've given it a coat of paint. I've been travelling the world this year talking to universities. I did a big talk at Google. I talked to Stanford and Berkeley and London and Cambridge and University of Texas. Talked at a few other places, and I've got a few more stacked up for next year. The Queen hands out the medal next July, so I've got to go back over to the UK for that. But my other passion is trying to work out how to make education use technology better. To try and our kids are absolutely addicted, slightly too strong a word, but close to addicted to these screens. And I think perhaps if we can turn that around and somehow make that a lot more educational rather than watching the Kardashians do whatever the hell they do, I think that would be beneficial. So that's where my passion is. People like, if you've ever seen the Khan technology, the Khan Academy website, that's something where it's really turning education on its head. And it looks to me, I can't see how it's the wrong answer to the right question.
Perhaps, Dave, you could share that analogy you shared with me earlier today. We saw the robot in action there, physically doing things on its own accord. So you described that the robot right now could chase us, but what happens where it gets a brain?
Yeah, well, what does happen when it gets a brain? Hopefully, intelligence means making a better job of looking after the planet. Hopefully, it means an army of these things building hydro dams for clean energy, for planting trees, for all those sort of things. Another question I was asked this morning was, will this mean more or less jobs? And I think it's a good question. I think it will mean more jobs, but less menial jobs. Computers in general have made more interesting jobs for humans and taken away some of the more menial tasks. And I don't see why that won't continue. But
Well, I was going to say, at what point do humans become actually not just irrelevant, but actually contradictory to the purposes of...
yeah, well, hopefully we're like a pack of dogs, and you can train a pack of dogs to be more environmentally friendly, socially friendly. I mean, I made the joke this morning, though, if you can't train the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of the UK on ethics, I don't know what chance we've got of making a computer work like that. But, you know, two of the most powerful men in the world have, I think it's fair to say, questionable ethics. They may be right, you may argue whether right or wrong, but I think there's definitely a question. So that scares me. I don't know how you teach ethics, in other words. I don't know how you promote ethics in a population.
Question, is it getting to the stage we're going to have to remodel a human being, because we are very much a physical as well as a mental animal?
Yeah, I think the question was, do we have to remodel a human being because what we are today, I guess you're saying, has no place in the future really, or may not have any place in the future. And I think that's probably true too. But the same thing happened with the scribes before the Gutenberg press. And the same thing happened with the Luddites with the loom. And so that sort of thing we've evolved our way around, that sort of technology. I think the scary thing is this time is the technology might out-evolve us more quickly than we can evolve. I think that might be the problem. I mean, you can easily see how the printing press would annoy a lot of scribes, but probably not fundamentally change their lives, but will change the human race. So yeah, it's a difficult problem, and a lot of people are thinking about this ethical problem.
Would you like to just finish on a positive note?
I would love to finish on a positive note. That little computer that I had before, which was the best we could do for about $500 in 1994, 25 years later, this computer is 1,000 times more powerful, 1,000 times more memory, 1,000 times more power efficient, and 1/10 of the price. So this is called, if you don't know this, it's called a Raspberry Pi. This is basically a full-on computer. It's designed to be the same size as a credit card. You can connect it up to your TV screen, your wired network, your mouse and keyboard, finished. So that's what a computer looks like now. So this is not Intel, this is the ARM version of an Intel computer.
Well, look, just on behalf of us all here, thanks Dave for taking the time out today and tomorrow night. I think it's a great privilege for us here to hear Dave and for him to share his experiences over the years, and we do look forward to whatever you create in the future. You know, to me, Dave is a worthy recipient of the Cantabrian of the Decade, or the New Zealander of the Year. And you've made an amazing contribution. You've been recognised globally, not yet here in this country. So I thought we should recognise you and give you this Nokia phone. It may be useful in the future. And once again, look, could I ask you all to show your appreciation?
Thanks so much. Very kind. Very kind.